Awesome.
I'm still working on an intro, I'd say, for the Alliance, but it's a work in progress.
Yeah,
But anyways,
I
I'm
think
joined
you
by,
should try just singing a little ditty, maybe something like that for starters. You know, just a.
well, I'll work on my singing voice.
There
I'll
you
work
go.
on my singing voice. um, Actually, maybe I'll just pen something and I'll just sing that next time. I'm joined by the incredible Richard from Iron Age Media. How do you do, Richard?
Doing great. It's a nice intro. I don't know if I've been called the Incredible Richard before, but I'll certainly take it.
um, well, another name for Richard is Dick. I could now. Um, I guess I'll start for those who aren't familiar with you, considering, well, I don't know too many people on YouTube and whatnot who don't know you, but um, at least in the circles I run in. But on
Yeah.
Substack, there's a few that don't, and same with Storyfire, weirdly enough.
Hmm.
So I'll ask you to introduce yourself and tell us how you got started with Iron Age Media and Anvil.
Okay. So, Iron Age Media started out just kind of on a whim. The goal of the website is to cover smaller indies and mainly it was sort of non woke, but it's also just kind of a broad right leaning or quality focused indies who are trying to connect with customers. I saw that, you know, there's a number of bigger projects that have become successful over the past decade, and uh, they they have um, they have some crossover in terms of their customer base, but those customers aren't really like cross-linking. It's not forming into a broader market necessarily. Even though that market does exist, it's just a matter
Mm.
of getting people to know about each other. And so my original goal there was to just kind of have only indies. I didn't want to talk about any of the like non-woke stuff, but because I noticed that there are some websites like Bounding into Comics, for example, who do great work, but they also cover, you know, like Superman's gay now or whatever. And the thing about that is that
Mm.
most people click, way more people click on Superman is gay than the new upcoming comic. And that's fine. I think it's reasonable to go where readers are, but the side effect of that is that just organically indies got drowned out even in alternative media, right?
Yeah.
So the goal with Iron Age Media was to only talk about indies, not to engage in the culture war from the critique side of things, and just kind of provide a hub for that. And since then, it's grown into a lot of different things. One of most notably Anvil Magazine, which is a magazine of short genre fiction and comics that I've been putting
Mhm.
out, and just a couple of other one-off projects and things like that. So
Okay.
that's really what I've kind of been doing. I've also started dabbling in game dev, but that's not directly Iron Age Media related. So,
Why game dev?
well, before all this started, I had actually played around with, uh, like very long time ago, like in 2013 or so. I got into making mods and things like that, and I got
Mm.
heavily into making some mods for like Kerbal Space Program. Which, if you know what that is, then great, and if you don't, that's also fine.
I've gotten a
But
bit of an idea.
yeah, but you know, I'd been in modding in various games for a long time. I'd kind of learned about making games in 2001. I tried making a game just to see if I could do it, and it's been a medium that I'm interested in. I think that it's possibly a good entry point into the market for indies. You see a lot of indie games starting to put
Pop up.
yeah, pop up and really put some of the AAA titles to shame. And I think, you know, that's almost inevitable. that that market is heading for an upset very soon.
And what's more is that, well, I'm in ironically a video game design and writing course right now that I
Oh, really?
decided to go for a month or two,
Hmm.
and because it's only a 2 month program, but it's very intensive. Um, but in there, they confirmed, and you could see from the class roster, it's mostly a male dominated field, at
Yeah,
least
very
in
much so.
terms of development. But it's going to be, it's still very big. Um,
Hmm.
the well, the market's also easier in some ways to support. Well, it's easier thanks to this market to support a indie project than, say, no offense, a magazine, which is probably a lot more work in some
It
ways.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I'm gonna say I tried making an entire 2D game when I was in my original video game course, which was like 2013, ironically,
Hmm.
and I got scolded because we were supposed to be doing 3D. I wanted to work on 2D, but I spent 10 to 12 hours a day on that for like a year and never even got it close to launch.
Mm.
So,
Yeah,
it,
that's a very normal story over on that side of things. So, except a lot of people tend to do that, except for like years in some
yeah.
cases.
But what's interesting is how most people go to Patreon, Kickstarter, and whatnot for their to finance their indie games, and they're releasing them in updates, I believe. Like, oh, here's the initial draft, then here's a whatever
Yeah,
update. I've seen that in the RPG Maker kind of community online.
yeah. Um,
So 3D or
I
2D for you?
well, I've messed with both. Um,
Oh,
Most recently, so the first game that I tried making was a 2D game in Unity, and then I made something very similar this summer in Godot, and
mhm.
then the past two games that I've made, which were both for game jams that are for conservative game devs,
Oh,
were
I've seen
both
it.
3D. So yeah, it's interesting. I really think that a lot of the benefits that were there for indies in the 2D world are somewhat diminished now because the engines have gotten so much stronger, so much more
Yeah.
powerful. For example, the very first game that I made back in 2001 or 2000 or 2021 was very much a like I spent a ton of time on pixel art because I thought, oh, this is easy, and then I got into it and I was like, oh no, actually, this is
Oh,
very
yeah.
complex. Like
It
there's a
is.
lot more nuance to it than you realize. Well,
Mm.
now you know I'm just going to make a 3D model in Blender, throw a shader on it, and if I want to have a toon shader, then great. If I want to turn it into pixel art, then great. There's ways to generate
Mm.
sprite sheets from 3D models, and I've decided that,
Yeah, I've seen
uh,
those.
yeah, no longer am I going to be trying to, delve those depths. If I want to have that art style, then I'll either pay somebody to do it, or I will get, that 80% of the way there with these kinds of shader tricks and things like that, just because it's more pragmatic.
I've seen one studio that's making 2D games in Unreal Engine, but it's like
Hmm.
purely 2D, like RPG Maker. Uh, they're trying to go with a style similar to Tales of and Lanif, or at least Vulcan Profile Lanif, I should say. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No, not offhand. Is
Oh,
it like a 2.5
yeah,
D
2.5 there.
kind of thing, like the Octopath Traveler?
Yeah, something
I
like that.
remember the first time I played Octopath Traveler, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have so many ideas
Yeah,
for
same.
things that I could do." But then I think everybody else had that same feeling, and now
Yeah,
there's, I think a lot coming, even more than what's already out there. So,
yeah, and weirdly with game development, this is maybe my opinion, but with a dedicated enough staff and with enough energy, you can probably produce a game far more cheaply than, let's say, as I'm finding out, a novel or a comic book. least
I would say that it is actually, um, well, it depends. It depends. Are you
okay.
willing to leverage all the tools that are at your disposal as an indie? You know,
Mm,
in the game dev world, like if I say I'm using Copilot to write my code, well then good, that's good practice, right? Which
yeah,
Copilot is an AI assistant essentially, you know,
I know.
and there there's absolutely no stigma with that. You tell a comic book artist that you're using Blender mock-ups and then running it through an AI upscaler or filter or something like that, then people are going to want to cut your head off. You know, it's it's
Yeah.
very different. You know what the creative environment is, and it's also
Mm,
very different what the consumers are willing to buy. Because I still think that if the end result is good, I think most consumers, frankly, aren't that principled. You know what I mean? We're buying uh, iPhones from slave children. It's if the consumers really cared about ethics, I don't think they care about appearances, but I don't think that we necessarily have a super ethical consumer base on a lot of this stuff. You know, you can
mm,
court specific consumer bases by saying, oh well, this is organic, homegrown art, human art. You know what I mean? Just like you can court certain consumer groups by saying something's organic, homegrown eggs, or you know what I mean, like farm fresh, never cage eggs and things like that. But you have to actually capitalize on those decisions if you're going to make them, in my opinion. If you just
okay.
shotgun out to everybody, then I think you're going to find that it's really a toss up as to whether or not the consumer cares.
Yeah. So I'm gonna guess you don't believe in the global market.
Well, I mean, uh, expand on what do you mean in that sense?
I'm joking.
Oh,
I meant the how the woke use the term.
okay. I was gonna say, yeah, no, it's very funny because if you actually look at the global market as a literal term, you know,
Hmm.
it's obvious. It's oftentimes much more apathetic about all these various sub causes, whether you're talking about AI or grass fed beef or
Yeah.
whatever, then the whole gamut of all products, the global market cares way less than the Western market does about
Hmm.
these things. And so it's kind of very funny that the Western market is, well, we need to make things for a global audience, when if you look at the global audience, man, they don't care.
No, they
So
actually don't want anything to do with that stuff.
yeah, not usually. It's certainly not the particular pandering
Yeah.
that you see so commonly.
Yeah. I tend to communicate. Well, I got some friends over in Japan, and I'm French, so I'm connected to the Francosphere, I guess you could call it.
Hmm.
And the Francosphere has its own pandering buffoons,
Mm.
just like the Anglosphere does. But the funny thing is that the Francosphere, um, if a lot of Anglo Saxons could actually understand us, they would probably be horrified by how racist the French are and
Oh,
how
really?
there's just, yeah, it's just, but it's more racism along cultural and linguistic lines. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Well, I can believe that the
yeah,
French aren't known for their uh, what would you say, their humility, just as a
well,
general rule.
there's, well, there are some who are humble, but where the nation of France and its culture is concerned, no, no, there's
Yeah,
no
exactly.
humility whatsoever.
Culturally, they're not. Yeah,
No,
they're
no.
not humble about their culture at all.
Re- yeah, religiously, yes. Culturally, never.
Yeah.
I think, like, in terms of religion, when I see someone say "Je suis catholique" ou "Oh Monseigneur," like "Oh my Lord," it's so humble. But then the minute it's like, "What do you think of France or Quebec?" Goes out the window, and they're going,
Yeah.
"Ah, it's the best." What do the English or the Americans know? What do they freaking know about and then it just gets funny. But there's also things like lots of cultural stereotypes, lots of stereotypes. But then if you look at the Japanese,
Mm-hmm.
I well, I've talked to some of them, and some of them have said, uh, well, for example, in one job interview, I was asked, just to be clear, what's a woman? And I went, well, it's a woman, someone who can become a mother, someone who's of the fairer sex. And they went, okay, good, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
And they go, um, but seriously, what the hell's up with your country? And you
Yeah.
go, I don't know. And they go, okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to make sure we need to run a test just to make sure you're not stupid and crazy. And they
I
put
mean,
in those words.
in many cases, those people can be a liability on things,
No, but the
and
Japanese have zero tolerance for that stuff.
hmm well, I mean, I think that I don't know. LinkedIn may have added pronouns to my bio just without asking me or something like that, But like,
Mm,
I've never added pronouns to anything, no matter how many times
no,
I've been prompted. And
I don't
I think of
understand it.
all the people who do that just because they think, oh well, this is just what we're doing now. But
Yeah, it's weird.
we may not be doing that much longer. And once that sort of
Goes away.
direction is realized that no, we're actually not going to be pursuing this off the edge of a cliff, and other people are going to go somewhere else and actually pursue meritocracy and quality and all the other things that we should have. Then all that stuff basically just becomes a huge red. I'm a gigantic
Brick.
litigation risk for you. I'm a huge HR risk.
Yeah.
There's the most left leaning people that I've worked with. One of them, I was friendly with her, but she filed also. I mean, she filed sexual harassment claims against like 4 or 5 people, and this
Yeah.
is in a manufacturing environment, and it's just like she didn't like being called. You know, I think one of them called her hun. In like a and it wasn't even like he did it repeatedly. She was like about to get herself hurt, and he was like, "Hun, no, like don't do that." She didn't like being embarrassed,
Yeah.
and so she just came after him for that reason. She'd wear low
Which
cut
state?
shirts, and then she'd whatever. It's like these people are a problem. You know?
Well, I know in the southern states, Han and whatnot is just like everybody uses it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's especially women use it towards everybody. Older women, I would say,
yeah,
is the most common usage. So it's a little
it,
bit.
it's
I could
it's
see where it might be like, hey, I don't, like I'm not comfortable with that, maybe. But you know, if you want to say that, that's fine. That's your prerogative to make that.
yeah.
But to just start, using, there was no
There was no
need for
such
that to happen.
implication.
And that wasn't her goal. She was just looking for any tool that she could use to
Mm,
use the system, because in her perception, doing that was to her benefit. And I think that, I don't know, I think as time goes on that people are going to view that as, oh no, actually this is very this is a
bad.
bright red flag, and we should stay away from these people, because they don't help productivity, and they're ultimately not here to do what we want them to do primarily, which is work or get a job done or something else.
Yeah.
They're after other things, whether it be spreading ideology or propping up their own status or whatever else.
Okay. So um, now I'm gonna ask, I guess, a political question. I've noticed this online and even in real life, even out here, and I live in a pretty uh, well, I live in a left leaning area because it's Ontario, but
Hmm.
all of Ontario is basically well, Canada would probably say I think red, but you guys would say blue. It's
Yeah.
not like Quebec or Alberta. Ironically, real quick, people think Quebec is all um, lefty. Trust me, it's It's the Texas of Canada.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's very nationalistic. It's just there's a belief, the French cultural arrogance.
Hmm.
That's what it is. But the pronoun stuff, zero tolerance. Um, I taught at a school where the principal believed in that stuff, the superintendent believed in that stuff, the
Hmm.
staff hated it, and everybody in the school board hated the two of them. Like,
Hmm.
but it's regarded as inferior, and I think they use the term it's inferior thinking. And one of the bigoted statements that was used was it's Anglo thinking. It's English people do that. We're French. We
Yeah.
don't think like that. What the hell is wrong with you two? And I
Hmm.
remember just being alarmed just at, well, I'm an Anglophile. So, it's a little, you're kind of caught in the middle in that conversation. You go, I'm going to back out of the
Yeah.
room right now and I'm going to let you guys fight this one out. But
Hmm.
I'm not proud of that because I was a bit cowardly, but I'm autistic. I don't know how to react in those situations. But I guess my question is, it's a political one. Um, and I think things have changed. Would you say that things are changing? Yes, but there's suddenly been a huge shift since Trump won.
I think that there is a uh, big uh, emotional change in
Mhm.
the sense that I was listening to I think it's Mark Andreessen, and he's got a podcast, but this is a crypto and tech focused um,
Yeah.
podcast. And if for anybody who isn't paying attention, Bitcoin is now at all time highs. A lot of
Oh, yeah.
coins are pumping. A lot of financial tech is pumping big time, and they made the
I
comment
had no
that
idea.
like they thought this would happen, but like sometime in the future, there would need to be some policy. No, it's just the sense that the boot has been taken off the neck is enough for a lot
Mm.
of optimism to suddenly flow into the system. And I think that is the case. I also think that um, you know I think there's still some people waiting, but I think a lot of people have just sort of had the sense that the current direction that we were going in wasn't working um,
Mm.
with any number of areas. You talk about they were talking about like the crypto and financial sector where it was, anarcho tyranny, where like meme coins are allowed to, essentially pump and dump, scam billions of dollars in some case. But a utility coin that's trying to facilitate, like, be as legal as possible, and facilitate financial transactions for potentially exactly the kind of underprivileged people who might not have access to traditional finances, or the money to pay for accountants and lawyers and everything else to set up contracts. You can just set contracts up with 0% trust,
That's
100%
cool.
transparency in crypto. Well, those people get raided by the FBI. They get their bank accounts
Um,
frozen, and they get
mm.
totally shut out.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So, and in the same way with energy, people trying to play by the rules with things, were not getting drilling permits. They weren't, you know, getting the kind of movement that they needed. All this was just completely frozen out. So whether you were talking about something as
Same
small
kind.
as,
I was
well,
going to say same kind of regulation is here in France and Germany.
I mean, Europe,
So, like
uh,
everything's frozen.
Europe has, they also made the point that Europe is essentially funding Russia's war in Ukraine, right? And that's because they went green energy, which didn't scale, didn't
They
actually
should never have.
work. And then they turned off all their nuclear plants. And the only place they can get energy from now is Russia. So
Yep.
they put themselves at the other, they basically handed Russia a gun and then walked in front of it and said, "You can rob me now,"
Yeah.
And
The
it,
funny thing is, this is a complaint that's the most common, almost the most common thread of complaint in the French Reddit, French forums, French Twitter, French
Mhm.
Substack. Everybody's complaining about this and saying, "Why in the hell did we our leaders ignoring our complaints. When we revolt and protest and riot, they just stamp the boot harder. They've shut
Mm-hmm.
down our nuclear reactors. Why are they listening to the EU? The EU is part of NATO, and NATO's not looking out for us. We got to turn the reactors back on.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we funding Russia when Russia doesn't like us? And
Yeah. Yeah.
you have Germany, which has the same complaint. So this is exactly what everybody's talking about in Europe.
Well, it's all part of the um, same mentality, which is that was so pervasive, the anarcho tyranny, which is if you're a crack addict who, breaks into a car and beats a woman and craps on the sidewalk, that's just natural, and we need to help you. If you are somebody who wants to try and run a small business, and or maybe open up like a a couple of rental properties. We hate you. We need
Or
you
a
to do
bookshop.
paperwork. We deserve even more of your income. We hope you die. You know, and
Yeah,
and
I know all about that.
that like little microcosm scaled up all the way to all financial technology, to crypto, to energy, to everything. And so the idea that I think people were I personally was I wasn't necessarily surprised by the outcome of the election, but I was surprised by the ease with which it occurred. I expected it to be much more of a fight for recounts and other things. I expected there to be more shenanigans, shall we say. And
Mm.
I think everybody, at least most people in America who are either, didn't vote or voted for Trump, all kind of had this collective sense of, well, I guess we're actually returning to the rule of law, because if one of the best things about rule of law is it's predictable, and whenever you're spending money or making investments and things like that, you want to have predictable outcomes and predictable events that occur. So from that sense, I think
Yep.
people are spending more money, people are making plans. I know I personally, I was talking to an acquaintance of mine who does a lot of different things. Jake Calta, he helps with Anvil. He also has 365 Infantry as well as a couple of other projects. But we both were talking, and essentially it was like our view just had narrowed down to this election. We were like, what is going to happen? Well, I'm not going to make any plans for after this because who knows? Like until what happens on the other side of this thing, it's hard to make any plans, and it feels like it's not worth the time. Well, now things have gone in such a way that I'm like, holy smokes, I've got to get moving on a bunch of things that I've been meaning to get moving on. So I think overall optimism is the big change. I kind of have wandered way off from where your original question was, but hopefully that
No,
answers
no,
it.
no. It is an answer. I'll be honest. I was kind of despairing and going, I'm going to have to choose one of several things in life right now. And this is going to be, this is kicking me in the nads financially. But now I'm like, well, with a Trump presidency, I'm kind of busy just looking at things and going, maybe I should, take the dice and throw them, because there's the financial potential for a lot. And like with Gemstone and whatnot, it's like, well, there's there's a lot more potential for payoffs right now, business wise, all across the board, all across the world, primarily in places like, well, I'd argue the US, Japan, Vietnam, those US centric, those countries or locations, I should say, which are following the US direction, where Trump's going to have the most direct positive influence. And I'll be honest, like here in Canada, people are going, oh, we hope the tariffs aren't back. This is going to hurt. But then there's a lot of young men I talk to out here who are also being lured over to Japan, because Japan's released a bunch of packages to lure over Canadians to the northern Arctic part of Japan. They're going, come here. So there's a lot of young men I'm talking to who are going, well, Japan had a great economic boost last time. we got to start making plans. This is going to be great for everyone. This is going to be
Hmm.
great. So I'm one of them. So at least, and even on I talked to people on Substack, and one interesting aspect of politics they're interested in over there is the spiritual and theological side of politics, which I
Hmm.
never thought there was such an angle to it. But they're all going, well, looking at it from a spiritual perspective, they're going, the boot has been released, no, has been taken off the neck, also on a spiritual or sociological level, if you think
Hmm.
about it. Like everybody's basically feeling relieved and overjoyed because, oh, we don't have another 4 years of Biden hammering, all of Europe, US, Japan,
Yeah.
Vietnam, and whatnot. Like, we don't have that anymore. We've got 4 years of relief, financial succor, and security and whatnot. So definitely understand that. I imagine a lot of people are also probably relieved over there about something finally being done about cartels and whatnot
Hopefully
down
so. Yeah.
down
Yeah.
in the South where you guys
Yeah. Well,
are.
I'm in Houston, so
Uh,
the one thing I am a little
oh,
concerned about is I'm betting that my home price, my home value will probably drop in the next 4 years, just because I think there's probably at least a 500,000 to 1 million illegals in the Houston area, and if they get
oh wow.
I don't necessarily think that they will be rounded up and deported or something like that. I think most of them will just go away if they no longer are as easily employed, and the
Mm.
benefits aren't there, because what you see around here is you're driving through a neighborhood. Oh, there's a house. It's got literally between 10 and 15 cars parked on its front yard, all around it, and they're
Oh
all
yeah,
work trucks.
that's
And it's
Canada.
like, yeah, you know what that is. And so you've got huge numbers of these families pouring into one or two houses in an area, and then doing that over and over again.
Hmm.
So as soon as you start knocking out a few blocks, then you'll have a lot more just leave because they're not able to
Party's over.
leverage the system. Yeah, exactly. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
I
no
don't know.
offense. I mean, no offense. It's worse up here.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I actually saw some like really absurd statistics for Canada in terms of
mm,
immigration percentages. It's something like I swear I saw something about like 35% of like maybe it was Ontario. I can't remember what it was, but maybe it was just Toronto or something like that. But 35% was like new immigrants within the last several years.
yeah.
Um, and that's crazy.
Since in part, well, people will say 9 years. It was bad before, but after COVID, it's gotten
Mm,
it
yeah.
went nuts. People like to say the truckers convoy accomplished a lot. Maybe in blowing open the lid, like on a lot of stuff, but
Hmm.
it failed to stop. I guess we'll call him the madman, since on YouTube you can't really,
Yeah.
yeah, you know how it is. But especially up here in the north. Um, Now, on the other hand, just this past week there was uh, a lot of drama that John Douglas, God bless him for this, kicked, he kicked open the hornet's nest when
Okay.
some clowns on Twitter were posting about how they've managed to corrupt the fantasy and sci-fi genres into being little more than pornography. And what happened was that John proceeded to, and I love him for this, repost one of his videos where he walked into a Barnes and Noble, but then he went, I think, to another, he went to Target, that's it, and posted a second video because the first one was from months ago. And
Hmm.
what he did was he showed everyone what they've been doing to the genres. He had already posted about it months ago, but now the woke tards, uh, you know, bragged about it just this past week. John
Hmm.
rebutted them with by resurrecting that video and a new one. And after that, there's been some back and forth, and it bled into Substack. I'm kind of guilty of that one because I decided to
Hmm.
carry it over there. post this like 10 to 20 page essay about it, just saying, okay, this is the problem. And here's how you fight it. Here's the
Man,
solution.
I should have been paying more attention to Twitter. It sounds like I've been kind of
No
on a
worries.
hiatus.
No, I get it. I'm trying to find someone to handle Twitter for me because I just don't want to go back. I
Mhm.
was dragged back kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
But the thing is, now with Substack, which I love, thank you for that because you were the one who directed me to Substack.
Yeah.
So you're entirely to blame. I mean, you get all the credit. I'm joking. So thanks. But there, when I introduced the problem, I also did a bit of research because I decided to look up what Penguin and Hatchet and others were up to because I
Yeah.
got somebody tipped me off what they were doing because someone gave me a video on the female domination, or I should say liberal female domination of the publishing industry. I kind of went in blank slate, not knowing what's going on. I knew
Mhm.
how bad it was in French. The French publishing industry is, you can't publish things. It's all nonsense. But I saw the video. I was horrified. Then I decided to look it up further. And Penguin and the Big Five basically, or at least two of the Big Five, have policies of they'll accept um, uh, some sort of term by something, I don't know. I can't remember, BIPEC or
Without an
BIPOC.
agent, you know what? Like,
Yeah, unsolicited.
yeah. Okay.
And also minorities, all the
Well,
usual
yeah, of
terms,
course.
but not men.
Hmm.
And the thing is, because on this one YouTube video, the guy talked about it. I'll have to send it to you later. Or I'll just send you the essay and you can read it. The guy talked about it, and because I included the video in my essay. He
Hmm.
discussed all this and how they're allowed to come in unsolicited, but the rest of us need an agent or are just auto rejected because we got to keep the men out of everything because of the, I don't know, patriarchy or whatever the
Hmm.
buzzword is of the day. But this kicked up open a hornet's nest, and it's now blowing up on Substack, and it's now blowing up on Twitter because people are apparently, especially young men, are very angry about this. And um,
Well, yeah.
yeah, a lot angrier than they were before
Hmm.
because the claim is men don't read at all, and young boys don't read. Now, I'm a school teacher, or at
Hmm.
least I was school teaching till a little while ago, and the boys read more in my experience. They read
Yeah.
voraciously. Dragon Ball Z, Demon Slayer, Proseda. I All my French students were reading the Proseda. Oh my gosh, I was on freaking cloud nine hearing about that. They read
Yeah.
Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, all this stuff. Um, uh, but the girls will follow the boys and read whatever the boys are reading because they
Interesting.
think that's what's cool.
Hmm.
They follow the boys' lead. Um, but the boys are the ones who set the standard for what's good or not. They do the research, they look it up, they pass it along to the girls, and the girls will then read it. If I tried to push something like, well, okay, let's try seeing if the girls like this, they run it by the boys.
Interesting.
And they're not going to touch it if the boys won't. And if the boys say, ick, no, that's it.
Hmm.
And I had a hard time at one point explaining that to a principal because it's like, you have to force this book on them. I can't. Why?
Yeah. I mean,
They're
I remember
not.
in high school reading so much feminist slop.
This is
I
elementary.
elementary. Yeah. Uh, I don't. I don't really remember what we had reading assignment wise in elementary. I think it was mostly for enjoyment, right? I've
Yeah,
always been a reader, so
same.
it's I read so many books for enjoyment. I'm not sure if I remember anything that I read that wasn't for
Same.
enjoyment. You know what I mean? That just
Yeah.
it blended in with all the other kind of this is all right.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember being 11 and being told you're not supposed to be reading Dracula because I found the book on the school bookshelf.
mm,
and I'm just reading Dracula, and it's like, no, no, that's not yours. And I fought to keep it,
That's
but
funny.
it wasn't. That's the only book I know was not part of the curriculum. But I don't know about the rest,
Hmm.
because there was Call of the Wild I read. I don't remember if it was part of it or not.
Yeah.
Um, there was The Hobbit. There was a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, so what do you think of this Hornet's Nest? How do you think this is? A lot of people are saying this is really burning. This could this is really burning the publishing industry, the trad pub.
Yeah. I mean, I think. Well, I think what is interesting is that in a lot of ways, I feel like, and maybe this is completely wrong, but sort of the sense
Mhm.
that I get based on whenever I've talked to people who are involved with publishing
Mhm.
and whatnot, is that they sort of looked up fondly at the big news outlets, the big
Mm.
TV producers and things like that, and they went, oh, "Look, they're controlling. They get to set what they want, and they're basically they're dictating um,
The
the
standards.
the standards for the whole culture. They're leading everything." And then these publishing houses said, "We're going to do the same thing," you know,
Probably.
and uh, you know, it, and so they, I think, overestimated their influence, right? Because if you're interested in uh, printing books and selling books at the end of the day, like you're not actually in that good of a business margin wise. You know what I mean? Whereas like TV and um, movies and things like that, they have access to all sorts of funding and advertising. They have all these different kinds of money income sources that
Mm.
are not necessarily available to publishers of books in particular. And so they overestimated their financial strength essentially, and have really since become, in many cases, you know, like I don't know for certain who owns the big five, but my assumption is, and I know for a fact it's true in at least two or three of them, these are these are basically just loss leaders. You know what I mean? They're not really looking for new books necessarily. They're just looking for what they already had. You know, it's like buying up IP, it's buying up rights to different things, and you know, most of the sales, if I'm not wrong, I haven't looked at this in a long time, but I believe if you look into it, where publishers make their money, like 95% of it is from old books. You know,
Yeah,
they don't make hardly any money on new books anyway. So
it's a tax write-off.
yeah, and so the new books, they're just like, well, whatever. We'll kind of keep that going because we have some people and we already have the staff on hand, and we can essentially act as vanity presses for a few people here and there. And you know, sometimes whenever you see like you know, oh, this political insider just sold their you know, biography and it's the best selling book in America or whatever, and it's like, is it really though? You know, how much of that was printed in China and never left China? You know what I mean?
Mm.
As though there's actually going to be a you know, a huge demand for an English book over there that, you know, in reality the books never got printed and it was all part of a kickback, you know. And so I think that one of the problems is that the publishers aren't really in the selling books game anymore, at least not selling new books game anymore. The one exception that's kind of missing link, I think, is Bain. I still like Bain. I know that they've done some things that, you know, people have disagreed with and think and so on and so forth, but they
Mhm.
are at least making their money by selling books, you know, and
Kudos
especially
to
by
them.
selling new books. And uh, you'll see a lot of other small presses. How are they making money? Well, they're making money by actually selling books. So I think small presses are going to continue to do better as time goes on and they get more established with as far as developing an audience for their brand of whatever it is. I do think that publishers are going to become more niche, but I I think that eventually I think that publishers will have something to offer indies again. I don't necessarily think that the only indie revolution is going to go on. Not that you can't be successful without a publisher. I just think that they're going to have a much better value proposition for indies in the next 5 years, like 5 years from now, than they do today, essentially. So is
That's fast.
that I don't know. Once again, I feel like I've
Yeah,
kind of mumbled
I think
around.
it's really fascinating. No, no, no. That you had a very interesting train of thought there. Do you think, because right now it's a lot of publishers go with, because I have to deal with them all the time. We'll print the book, you do all the marketing, and we'll sit back and collect some royalties.
See,
But but
that's probably the
apparently,
worst case for a lot of things, because I think that actually the layout and design of the book is probably some of the easiest stuff to learn yourself as an indie. Now, mind you, that
Mhm.
is a time commitment. You need to take it seriously. I've seen way too many people, and since we already are talking about John A. Douglas, I'll throw him under the bus. The very first version of the Black Crown, it was left aligned. The text wasn't justified. It's like, you know, come on, man, justify your text and make it nice. Don't give us this ragged edge. And he got it fixed, so it's fine now. But I think that indies, as far as the preparing your book for print, is that's something that is very detail oriented, and maybe you're not a detail person. Well, I think you can actually save yourself quite a bit of money. You can do a lot of work there by doing that. And frankly, going back to the AI comment, we're very, very rapidly approaching a space where all that layout and everything else is gonna be even easier
Automated.
than it ever has been. You know,
Yeah.
um,
What I do these days is, like, for formatting, I got the book, I handled it as best I could. I then put it into Draft to Digital,
mhm,
formats it almost immediately. I go through the book, or I hand it to Dan. He's faster, so he
mhm,
scrolls through the whole thing, searching for the slightest formatting error and layout error, sends it
mhm.
back to me. I fix, I put it through the system. Perfect.
Yeah.
And that takes maybe an hour and a half,
Yes.
just
So where
like
where I
that.
think
So,
publishers will have something to offer indies more as time goes on, and you're already starting to see this develop somewhat. And I'm blanking slightly here, but is it? Let's see. I believe it is Wargate Books. Let me.
I like that name,
So yeah,
Wargate
it's
Books.
yeah. So I mean, but they tell you like that this is part of branding. Small publishers are going to have to get smarter about branding and
Mm.
developing a consistent audience. And so um, I believe that uh, Wargate are the ones who are publishing the Land and Sea novels.
Mhm.
Let
I
me
have no
see
idea what
here.
those are.
That's from Blaine Pardo, but
Oh,
he's
Pardo, I know.
partnering with them. Yes, it is. They didn't have him listed right where I was looking, so I just wanted to make sure. But
Mhm.
essentially, this is a publisher that focuses in on kind of a military sci-fi and some military-esque fantasy,
Oh,
and
I know
they
them.
have they have a very strong audience. If you're an indie,
Mhm.
then they have a lot to offer you. I don't know what their sales numbers
Yeah.
are, but presumably they probably across all different everything, they might have 50 or 100,000 customers, readers, you know. As an indie, that is a huge benefit to you. You know, formatting your book,
Yeah.
who cares? Who cares about that, right? But so like looking at people like them, they are the ones who are going to be, I see them as succeeding in the future. The big publishers that
Mhm.
produce stuff and it goes to Walmart and everything else, like, I don't know, that is, I kind of see that as
Fading
almost
away.
becoming a non, like just basically almost a different industry entirely,
Mm.
you know. Because those publishers, like I said, they're not primarily interested in putting forth the best books or finding new books. They're just kind of worried about churn. And okay, well, I need to fill something up, and all right, I'll give this, and then we can write it off, and we'll trash it, and we'll write that off as a a loss and tax break or whatever. Their thinking is so much different than indies who are actually concerned, not just indies, but small publishers who are actually making a living by selling books. That I think the new way of doing things, the new standards are going to rise to the top over time, and it's just a matter of giving it enough time to mature and get there, and having enough penetration into the market that it happens faster. But I think it's going to happen
Great.
eventually.
Now we did get a dick joke. Come on, Richard. Keep it clean. I'm not Razor Fist.
Well, listen, I'll try to keep the main thrust of my argument on track this time, and not get too carried away. Anyway.
Sorry, I couldn't resist that. I'm a fan of his, so I couldn't resist the jab. This is what we French call être taquiner. Taquiner, which is a like you tease someone affectionately.
Okay.
Um, but in a male way, you bust each other's balls.
There we go.
Especially
Okay.
those you like the most. Like in my case, yourself and Razor.
Yeah.
Okay, so I honestly, that's a lot bigger an answer than I thought because I'm signed on for one book with En Route Media, who are a Catholic publisher.
Hmm.
They've never done, I think, well, they've done a little fantasy, just a little, but most of it I think was with female writers. I'm one of the first male ones.
Hmm.
But one thing I did end up telling them was I want control over my cover design. I'd like to be the one to commission the artist. I
Yeah.
want that, like, covers are a passion of mine. And they said, good, because we don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
That's your problem. That's
Yeah.
your
Well,
cost.
that's
And
yeah, I understand that. I also, they should be careful because sometimes, covers can really, unfortunately, have a very outsized impact on the
yeah, well, they
outcome
said
of
if
how
they
well a
don't
book
like it,
does.
they'll veto. They'll
Yeah.
veto
Okay.
it if they don't like
Yeah.
it.
Well, that can be an
But
expensive veto.
yeah,
So.
thankfully I've got, this is one time I'll brag like a Frenchman and say I've got good taste because I
Well,
think
there you go.
Germans styled fantasy covers are the best. So,
Interesting.
well, it's just if you look at like the old Lord of the Rings and Dragon Bone Chair covers,
Hmm.
like in those 90s style pastiche Conan and Cole
Yeah.
novels with their covers, I think those are the best. So I basically went for an artist who drew me up something like that.
Awesome.
So it's
Well,
got to be metal
I really look
or,
forward to seeing it, man.
well, you can find it on my crowdfund.
Oh,
It's,
really? Oh, well, yeah,
yeah.
that's true. That is true. I I was gonna say I was having a moment of blanking out there, but no,
Here,
the
I could I could bring it up on the screen.
no, I found it. I've got it over here. Hold on, my computer's
No, I
gonna.
meant the art.
Yeah, the art
Dark Spire
is
conspiracy.
there. We go. Interesting. Yeah, I'm excited to get a good read in on that. I've been so crushed for time. I read Theft of Fire like a few months ago, and I haven't read anything since, unfortunately.
I've heard it's
Uh,
good.
it's good. I will say, um,
Mhm.
my recommendation is that I think it's overall very good. It's kind of a return to older sci-fi. Um, it is, however, three characters in a big tin can for basically 99% of the book,
That sounds
and
cool.
it's cool. A lot of good things are done there, but it, it's like I also am kind of like, I'm a short fiction guy, so I'm like a little bit more, a
Mm,
little bit more. Just give me a little bit more, a little faster, please. And so I'm eagerly awaiting. My recommendation would be pending on how well things are resolved in the second book, because there's still a lot of balls in the air after the first book, and so making sure that he can kind of land that and juggle those well enough to then get everything back out of the air without dropping anything is
that's hard.
a that's a question of whether or not he can do it. Based on what I've seen so far, I think he will. But I always will say, if you're going for a multi-book series, until the series is out, it's hard to say for
Yeah.
sure that these things are going to be resolved in a satisfactory manner. Because after I read the first book, I went, wow, I really want the second book, which is good from a sales perspective. But I also feel like as a reader, I just wanted a little bit more. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
the second book is, I know, scheduled sometime for next year. It was supposed to be out, I think, right about now, but he had to push it back. I believe his wife has cancer, and so he's kind of
Oh,
realigned some of his
mm,
priorities to
poor
deal
guy.
with that. So understandable, these things happen, but definitely a strong recommend if you love sci-fi. If you don't love sci-fi, I would say wait and see how the second
Okay.
book pans out.
I'm I'm not really a sci-fi guy. I'm more
Hmm.
mythic fantasy.
Yeah.
Um, I'm well, most of what I read is really old stuff, or like from Howard Tolkien. I want to get into Lord Dunsany
Hmm.
and like 80s and 90s fiction of that sort that I'm passionate about. So it's why I really liked Eric Wagg's book, because I thought, oh, this is like in the 80s. This is, yeah, kind
Yeah.
of a Norse Conan light, but it's 80s badass fiction. This is what I
Yeah.
love. Um,
Yeah.
but
I
yeah,
liked his books. I also liked Herman P. Hunter's uh, books. I thought those were good.
mhm,
The Revenant in the Tomb. Yeah, Revenant in the Tomb and Revenant in the Cult.
never heard
Um,
of it. I'll have to look it up.
I do recommend those. And
Okay.
then what else was there that I came across recently that I thought was good in that same vein? I just thought of it. And I'm blanking. This is more modern, I would say, in its writing. But I thought the Saga of the Forgotten Warrior from Larry Correia is pretty good.
Mhm.
It's kind of like a take on Indian mythology set in a um, fantasy world, but with a few sci-fi elements kind of dropped in there. It's an interesting one. Uh,
Mm.
Again, I'm waiting on that series to wrap up, but I think it's good. It's not as profound as some of the or as concise as like Wags or Herman P. Hunter stuff, but I think it's still good. Um,
Oh,
I know
I
what I
just
was
lost you
thinking
as a
of. I was
reader.
going to
I'm
ask you
not
if
good
you
at
read Gene
concise.
Wolfe. I was going to ask if you were a
I
fan
know a bit of
of what?
liquor. I do.
Yeah.
I like her. I like London,
Oh no
Walter
no.
Scott,
Or am
but
I? Hold on. Am I blanking? No, I'm thinking of. It's what is it? The Book of the New Sun?
no,
Is
I
it
was
Gene?
thinking Virginia Woolf for a second.
No. Gene
Like
is it?
Gene Wolfe.
Hold on.
Oh, I don't know her.
But yeah, it is Gene Wolfe. Okay. Ah man, if you haven't read the Book of the New Sun, I strongly
I'll have to.
recommend that. One of his
Got it.
predecessor, or one of his, I believe it's a previous work, which was The Soldier of the Mist. I came across, and that one
I've
really
heard
blew
of
me
that.
away. It's
Okay.
about a warrior who has amnesia, kind of in I believe it's the ancient Greece, and because he has amnesia, he it enables him to speak to the gods, and so
Mm.
uh, the book is sort of set as a ongoing series of notes to himself about what's going on and his travels across the land. It's very interesting.
I think I've read a little bit of it.
Yeah.
It's just well, I didn't recognize it at first, but I think I have read a little bit of it.
Hmm.
Um, okay. Yeah, I'll have to take another look at it. I remember I liked it. I just put it aside over the months for other stuff. Life got
Hmm.
in the way. Um, well, you probably know how it is better than I do.
Yeah, these things
Uh,
happen.
I've been, I've been pushed towards Gamel lately. Um, I've never read Gamel before, weirdly enough. So people wanted me to read him just to give my thoughts about him on Substack. So kind of
Hmm.
doing that right now. He's actually pretty good. He's the first book he wrote, Legend, is pretty fun. I see why so many people in the indie sphere on Substack and Twitter imitate him.
Hmm.
Um, but this Greek idea is really interesting. Uh, what's and it's just as I'm wrapping up a Greco-Roman book, Olympnomachi. Um,
Hmm.
think Silmarillion meets well the Greek gods.
Interesting.
So yeah. If you want, I could send you the index to it later. It's over on my Substack. I've got most of the chapters. I just finished revising, and I'm going to be re-revising and just removing some brackets, fixing some notes up on it.
Hmm.
And by next week, I'll have it finished. And I need to find a publisher for that, um, or publish it myself.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that's something that. Um, as for Anvil and whatnot, now from what I understand, Anvil has been pretty successful overall. But oh,
Yeah.
you
So
were
I've this issue I've had major trouble with getting it printed at a price
really
that is actually going to allow me to keep doing it. Uh,
oof.
so it's there's been a lot of cost increases in the past year. Um,
Eek.
yeah.
Hopefully that'll drop.
Yeah, I don't ever really expect it to drop, but
Ah,
hopefully some other issues will get resolved. But regardless, um, it's one of those situations where it's kind of funding for itself, but uh, as long as I don't take anything, you know what I mean? As long as I
yeah,
don't pay myself for my time, it's it makes money. Um, so it's something that I'm going to keep doing, but I'm going to have to scale it up to really make it more viable long term, or I'm going to have to get a little bit more uh, intelligent about how much I'm able to offload and at what rates and things like that. So,
mm,
um, yeah, I mean, it's good. It's definitely much more successful than a lot of other um, small magazines that have kind of tried their hand and uh, things haven't worked out. So that's good. It's just yeah, it's a I don't know. It's all kind of a tricky process, and as I mentioned, like game dev, one of the things that I kind of like about the idea of dabbling more into game development is the simplicity of a digital product. you
yeah,
know,
same.
physical products are definitely a lot more tricky. So
Mm,
I'm actually one thing that I'm going to be doing in the next. I'm probably not going to put this out until sometime end of November, but I'm going to be trying to condense some of my thoughts about project management for indies because there's a lot of mistakes that I've made, and I see other people making
mhm.
and whatnot. But put that into a video, and then I'm going to be kind of pursuing trying to create some better resources for people who are wanting to engage in various projects, whether it be if you're just trying to write a novel, okay, then maybe you should just read up on writing techniques and things like that. But if you're trying to actually start to finish create a product where you're like, okay, well, not only am I going to write a novel, but I want to make sure that it's actually, um, you know, has an audience, and I'm able to, like for example, if you want to print it or you want to do a Kickstarter for it or something like that, how would you go about these things and try and condense some of that information down and put together a variety of kind of strategies for based on what you're focusing on. So, you know,
Could
so
be very useful.
yeah, I think that, I've consistently said that in a lot of ways, I'm not necessarily I'm creative in some regards. I do have some creative input on things, but I'm not like the creative. Whenever I'm publishing Anvil, it's to highlight other talented creatives.
Mm.
And whenever I'm putting together things with Iron Age Media, I'm interviewing people who are actually doing something creative and writing articles and so on and so forth. But with this, I'm hoping to kind of put some of my own area of expertise, which is project management and research, and just kind of a more structured way of going about things out there for people to leverage for themselves to help make things a little bit more painless, if possible.
And well, there's no way that won't be helpful to a lot of people who also, some of them don't always understand the troubles you're running into and how difficult it is on your end. So this will hopefully get them to be more mindful of,
Well, I mean,
that side of things.
it's one of those things where it's like you you have to, at some point in time, if people don't understand that, like a project like Anvil is different than ordering something off Amazon, you know, then I'm
It's
not going to really argue with them because there's just too big of a gap there.
yeah,
Um, so I'm not really doing it to really argue with anybody or make any point
no, I
in
just
that
meant
regard. But
it'll hopefully inform people of like also everything that all the entire process and
mhm.
why it's so tough and whatnot.
Well, I
And
think that if you get into if you begin a process with an understanding of what it's going to take start to finish and there's not as many surprises, then I think it's very beneficial overall for
mm,
your ability to maintain forward momentum. And I think maintaining that forward momentum is very important, especially for indies where you don't have any kind of like
big
real you can have an emotional support system, but you don't really have that same financial structural support system
no,
that other people have. So every time you kind of come across something and you're like, oh wow, I just got kicked in the gut, you do that 3 or 4 times and sometimes you just don't like it. Yeah, like the
oh
very
yeah,
first, for the very first Anvil issue that I did, it's the most financially, like in terms of numbers sold, it did very well, but I really didn't make very much money on it because at the end of the day, I hadn't accurately understood just how expensive international shipping would be. I hadn't fully understood how much care I would have to take in packaging of the like physical packaging, and like it's just all these little things sometimes will just sort of come out of nowhere and they'll kick you. And the same way if let's say you make a video game, okay, digital distribution, that's good, but
hmm
if you don't plan for the fact that if you don't really think about the fact and run the numbers on, well, Steam takes 30% immediately,
yep.
and then you don't always immediately get paid out because they are keeping a certain amount for refunds and all this other stuff. And suddenly then you go, okay, well, but I also have to pay for a license for these assets, and I've got to do these things. And by the end of the day, you know, you look at it and you're like, well, I'm making like $4 an hour, and if you don't understand what those numbers add up to be at the beginning, then at some point right in the middle of it or towards the end, you'll eventually be forced to figure out these numbers, and you'll go, oh God,
This is
did I actually want to do
ungodly.
this? But if you make that decision and you're like, no, I'm going to go through it, I know what I'm doing, and on the other side is this bigger goal, then I think it will help people prevent them from getting lost in the wilderness as much, so to speak.
Mm, well, that's a good point. So when it comes to, because I've noticed on Substack quite a few people who, they're wanting to form magazines or whatever. And I've been running the two main fantasy events, Sword and Saturday and Warrior Wednesday.
Hmm.
And most people kept nagging for a few months because it's approaching its first year anniversary. They've been nagging, why don't you make a magazine of this and collect all the stories and pump that
Hmm.
out? And I looked at Anvil and I went, no.
Well,
And a lot of people got upset, but my stance was just, I don't have your skills. And this
it,
is also pretty expensive. And, like, who's going to finance this and whatnot?
it,
So that was,
it's one thing. It's one thing to put something out as like a one-off and say you're not making any money. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not paying you. It's on the internet for free already. That's what it is.
hmm,
It's another thing, because one of my goals with Anvil was to intentionally kind of put the creatives first and myself last in the money chain of things, because
yeah.
Kursova made a very good point a long time ago. It was probably 2 years ago now that I spoke to him about this, but he said that he could get all sorts of great fiction for free if he wanted, but that would only drive the price of fiction even lower.
Hmm,
And so I went, that's a really good point. And at the time, I hadn't even thought about making a magazine. But when I eventually did have the realization that, oh, maybe I do want to try out Anvil, which was a few months later, that quote popped in my head, and I went, no, I need to make sure that I am paying. Obviously, I certainly can't pay pro rates, but I'm going to pay solid indie rates. And so that was my thinking with Anvil. But if you already have a community, right, and they're saying, hey, maybe it's not a magazine, let's make an anthology, an annual anthology or
that's
something
the
like that.
current trend they want. They want right now, a quarterly anthology. And
I will go to your defense on this. Quarterly is so much more than you think. Okay, in terms of time
mm,
commitment, I would go for annual or biannual, and I would start with annual and say, let's just have a voting. And anyway, maybe we could talk about, if you want some help,
I'm
then
actually I will admit, I'm pretty terrified of it.
well, I would be willing to try and help you make something happen if you're curious, if there's enough interest there.
Well, I'm
But
going to
I
be
would say you'd want to have some kind of, I would want to have very heavy community involvement, and maybe something closer to, cash prizes, or like a fundraised, yeah, the sense that I would have is, okay, we're gonna fundraise some money to give to the authors, and whatever we fundraise, that's what the split is. You guys get whatever's fundraised from that, and then
mm,
once the uh, anthology is put together, it goes on Amazon. It's print on demand, and you keep, meaning you keep whatever proceeds come out of that, because in the reality of things, it's probably going to be less than, after the first month, it's going to be less than $5 a month. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
you don't want to have to bother splitting $5 a month 12 ways every month for 5 years, which is why with Anvil, my contracts for ongoing
mm,
payouts end after 6 months. So it's
makes
like
sense.
my exclusivity period is very short, but so does my payout period. But if you look at it, almost like 99.9% of my sales occur before, like, right on that first release. And
Mm,
so that's how I organize things. around that. But yeah, if you can get community buy-in on something, I don't think it would be a bad idea at all. It would just
Mm.
need to be sort of very, very transparent, is what I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. Well, I've been running this event more as a, I guess you could say, a hobby. It
Hmm.
like you in my case, I wake up at 3 in the morning, I write, I'm creating for a few hours, but I'm collecting stories as I'm
Hmm.
basically on the phone, just up that send that to me by messenger or something, get home, collect the stories, open them all up in tabs, and that's like sometimes it's just 6 tabs, sometimes it's 20 tabs, and start putting them in, put a nice little comment to each, keep it wholesome, publish. And if I missed anyone, they then say, hey, you missed me. And I throw them in and it's
Hmm.
released on the newsletter. But um, now there's like, after a few months, they wanted a magazine. Then now there's a request for a anthology. And well, it's just every once in a while the request comes up and I never know what to do.
Yeah.
And I didn't go in with that. I just went in because there's a horror event on the site. Uh, there's a sci-fi event. I said, let's have a fantasy one because fantasy's
Hmm.
better. It was my comment. I Then we had a vote on who would host it. It was decided I would,
Hmm.
because I had suggested, let's do this. But how about man behind the screen, or this guy does it? No, you suggested
Yeah.
it, you do it. And I went, I have no idea what I'm doing, but now it's easy peasy. I just do it like that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's the huge request, Joe, why don't you have this thing? And now um, I've got, I think, one or two editors who want to weigh in and are volunteering. There's, well, there's a bunch of them. So on Saturday, I'm probably gonna have to put up a vote or something,
Hmm.
or tomorrow, or just say, well, what do you guys think or want? But like I said, I will admit that when I discussed a lot of stuff with you for on behalf of a friend, I remember I was like, wow, there's a lot of work that goes into this. I don't know.
Hmm.
I'm a lazy bum. Like me teaching lesson plans, writing, I don't have time for anything. How the heck does someone like Richard, who's also got family, who's got this and that, do it? Oh, this is gonna kill me. But now people are saying, no, no, Joe, you've got spare time on, I think, like Fridays and
Well,
Mondays.
don't
Do
let
it.
people overbook you
Yeah,
necessarily, but I will say that, you know, if you've got the community and they've got a
yeah.
strong interest in it,
Oh, they
I
do.
would give it a try. And,
Okay.
maybe, uh, if you can collect things and everybody is okay with, the understanding that, like I said, there's going to be like an initial payout and then that's all she wrote kind of thing.
Mm,
Um, then it, it it might be a good way to, kind of do something that they're excited about, right?
yeah.
But then also get a little bit of experience under the belt because you're going to have a better understanding of publishers and all the other shenanigans and whatnot
Mm,
on the other side. And it's always good to, if you can get that kind of experience in the same industry, to get a different perspective on it, it might be worthwhile to you. You know what I mean?
interesting. Yeah. So, what about uh so are we going to see a Iron Age uh gaming studios in a few years?
Uh, yes, in all likelihood. It's probably not going to be Iron Age Media. I haven't decided what I'm going to brand it as, but yeah, there's essentially going to be two things that are coming
Mhm.
soon, and one is, like I said, the kind of the productivity and project management angle of things. I am going to put together some literature on that, as well as start making my time more available for consulting and things like that, because a lot of people don't necessarily you know If you
No.
don't want to go through the hassle of learning how to do a full project breakdown on something, then you can, you know, if you'll answer my questionnaire, which I'm going to have kind of like a course to go along with it, you know,
Oh,
if you go through
cool.
this and you answer all those questions for yourself, and then you still want some input, well, once you've answered all those questions, I'd be happy to help you with some of these things. But a lot of them, you know, one of the problem with creative projects is that I can't tell you the answer. You know, it's not like I can say
You don't
something.
have a
Let's
crystal
say,
ball.
yeah, it's like, oh, I want to build a gazebo in my backyard. How much is that going to cost me? And it's like, well, let's see here. The average size is this, and I can go out and calculate the lumber costs and everything else, and then there's labor costs. Okay, yeah, I can tell you about how much it's going to be. You know, it's like with a novel. You know, I want to make a video game, or I want to make you know, uh,
Movie.
yeah, a short film, or I want to do whatever. It's like, man, these are like these are very you dependent questions. But
Mm,
so that's going to be one thing that I start doing, because I think that talking about optimism in the new Trump era, I think that that's going to be something that people need to do and want to do. They're going to start
yeah.
feeling that, wow, okay, I've been wanting to do this thing for the past couple of years, and now is my chance. And if I can help more people get over the finish line and not just, you know, like run themselves into the middle of the swamp and not realize that, you know, oh, you know, now I'm in
Ragged.
trouble. Yeah, then great. And then the other thing I'm going to be doing is some kind of game dev, game development, something. You know, uh, the last game that I made tied for first place in the game jam, which it was a very small jam, but there was talk
Congrats.
about wanting to make that. You know, let's try and make this into a complete title. And you know, I've waffled about it. Ultimately, I decided that I'm not going to. The costs would be too high. I'd have to sell
Mm.
like 400 copies of it before I would break even. You know,
Oof.
and it's like, I don't know if I can do that, and whatnot. So if I do want to figure out a way to get into game development, not just because I enjoy gaming and I think it's a more profitable medium for indies, but also because that's where a lot of people are. And I'm a strong
Mm.
believer in going where the customers are, and then you can bring them over into the reading, you know, the indie book
Yeah.
world, because there's a lot of great stuff over here. But if you can't get the eyeballs on it, then
It's worthless.
yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's sadly. I really like what a lot of indies are producing, but yeah, it's like you
Hmm.
said. In my case, I know it's a little weird, but I got into a video game course like 10 years ago, revisited it a
Hmm.
little while later, got into another course a few years after that, and now I'm in one where we're actually putting the blueprints, like through Artisy, together as part of the thing to
Ah.
build up a portfolio.
Hmm.
And for me, it's an addictive process where actually playing a game is not as much fun anymore because I'm getting older, but
Hmm.
actually making the game is like a puzzle for me, like a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah,
And so
yeah, and
that's where,
that's another good thing. I love tinkering with that kind of
yeah,
thing. So
same.
it's uh, one of those uh, activities where it's like I genuinely enjoy this, and I actually
Mm.
have some like
It's
natural
fun.
skills for it. So
Yeah,
that's,
same.
you know, so that's good. And I'm trying to find areas that are actually viable for me to be competitive in long term, you know,
Mm.
that are also indie, you know, because I don't want to keep doing the day job forever. As it
Mm.
is, I'd rather make my own day job, and so that's what 2025 is really going to be about for me, is trying to find that path forward,
I get that.
wherever it is.
Sign me up for that studio. I'm joking, but I think I'd like to probably get into a studio in 2025 and just relax for the year and just tinker, design department and writing department, and just but well, I want to. Well, there's a great need in the industry for lore guys. and lore is, well, you've read some of
Hmm.
my stories. Lore is all I obsess about.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, well, like Dragon Age had a staff of a few dozen people just working on the lore. So if I find a studio like
For
that,
all the
I'll
good
just,
it did them, but yeah.
yeah, like I meant like the old one, Origins.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But chuck me into that corner, lock me away, and forget about me, and I'll just tinker up some lore.
Yeah.
That's me. So that's what I'm going to look for in a studio and just get forgotten by the world for a year or two.
There you go. Yeah,
But
I'm one of the activities I may do, because I've been working with the other um, game jam folks. It was conservative game jam. Now I think it's based jam, or it's based.com. And they've been picking different themes, and they're very broad in what they're looking for. I'm kind of thinking about running my own game jam and saying, all right, we're doing visual novels. Here's a framework.
ooh,
You know,
those
here's
are pretty
everything you
easy.
need. Just write the script, test it out, create the images, and run with it. And I don't know
Mm,
if I want to do that, or if I want to do some kind of like a collaborative build where I just take a week off, or maybe a week of half days or something, and I stream for like 2 hours, and I just live build something, and we just call it good. But I think that there's a lot of different mediums, or there's a lot of different, I should say, genres within gaming that
yeah.
are ripe for the talent that I already see in the Iron Age, the current Iron Age space that's
Mm.
um, interfacing with me. I think that there's a lot of value that could be there, and if we start, kind of cross pollinating some of this stuff, we can, I
Yeah.
think, speed the
Process up.
speed the expansion of it, and the awareness, consumer awareness up.
Yeah. Because it'll also be easier to market a game because, well, you could just make videos about it. And even, like, for example, if you set up on a YouTube channel, like a separate one, all right, well, you record the developments the
Hmm.
phase, uh, and you then run a series of documentaries almost. Like, just, we started
Well,
with this, like a journal entry.
yeah, you have to be careful that you don't get too crazy about that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I mean, regardless, the
The
unfortunate
market's there.
reality is that the customer base for gaming is way bigger than the
Reading.
customer base for reading. And
Yeah.
so that's just how it is. And
Hmm.
um, like I said, you kind of have to go where the customers are,
Yeah.
and those people almost inevitably are happy to read if they have something that they want to read, but they're just
Mm.
not looking at the indie space. They're not necessarily looking to find something to read. They're just looking for enjoyment, and they found that gaming is a more reliable
And in their
outlet for those than for that kind of entertainment than reading is.
and in their defense, like it's incredibly hard to navigate the indies
Hmm.
sphere for books because it's so decentralized. Like
Yes.
people might say, "Well, I like Black Crown, but will I like, say, Lord Otter's book?"
Yeah.
Well, you don't know, and you don't
Hmm.
even know Lord Otter exists. Maybe you'd
Yeah.
love what he's got, but you have no idea. Where do you go to find him? Where do you go to find all the indies and
Well, I
whatnot?
mean, even if you go on ironage.media, you're only going to find a small few, you know,
Yeah,
and so yeah, it's unfortunate, but
yeah,
I think we'll get there. It's just the market is going to have to shift to a certain degree.
yeah.
Um,
We're gonna probably need something like a radio channel, or you know what I mean by that, like at least one
yeah.
channel to just sift through all of it, point people to to a website.
Hmm.
Even as we have gaming, which is where people are all going. Um, yeah, so I definitely feel you on the gaming. And it's pretty much where I'm taking my career because they'll pay some studios will pay up to 90K a year for
A lore
a writer.
person. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
or just a
yeah.
senior
And
narrative designer.
yeah, I think, it's one of those cases where, again, I would be happy to work with people, but I also want to, yeah, just sort of create my own business, create my own day job, And so we'll
Mm.
see. We'll see
Yeah.
how things go.
Don't we
But there's,
all?
you know, you start doing things for yourself, and if you are able to be successful as an indie, there's almost always somebody out there who's going to have a job that, you know, they could benefit from your expertise, and there's no reason why you can't, you know, take a little
Yeah.
column A, a little column B kind of thing. So
Yep. Of course, the marketing is going to be is always the hard part, but yeah, or at least the time consuming part, I find.
yeah,
Um,
for now, I think that'll get better in the future, hopefully.
hopefully. But anyways, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for
Um,
having me, man. I enjoyed talking.
hey, and I enjoy listening to you.
Well, good. I'm glad somebody does, right?
Someone other than your wife.
Oh well, that's the last. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, she's usually pretty good.
All right. So where can people find you?
IronAge.media. That also has links to my socials, including X and YouTube and Instagram. I'm most active on Discord. I also have a Discord linked there. If you want to
Ooh.
get a hold of me, that's probably the most reliable way to do so. And then, yeah, I think that's about it. I also have, if you want to check out some of the most recent games that I've done, I'm Iron Age Media over on itch.io, and you can download stuff for free over there. Take a
Gonna
look.
have to check it out.
Yep.
Well, I hope people will remember to check out your stuff, including your Substack, because, well,
I need to get more active on my Substack. I'm definitely guilty of neglecting that one. It's not in the circuit.
but it's one of the easiest to grow because there's no algorithm kicking
That
you in
is
the
true.
balls.
That is true.
Like on YouTube, like a guy like me who had nothing, I've scored 1,400 in under a year. So
Wow, that's really good.
yeah, I don't. There's 1,400 people out there who are totally drunk off their ass all the time, who have time to waste. But okay, I'm joking. I shouldn't attack my readers.
1,400 people with very questionable judgment, but that's great. So you know, maybe you should check out IronAge.media. Anyway, but
yeah,
I digress.
People should check it out. I'll link to your YouTube channel as well because, well, why not? And feel free to subscribe also here, whether you listen to the video on Substack, Storyfire, or YouTube. And don't forget to share it because why not? It's the thing
It's
to
always
do.
appreciated.
Yeah.
We get us indies got to help each other out.
Yep. So do take care, everyone. And